Hello guys, welcome to a bit of a unique video. Today I have a tier list. I consulted a bunch of top players, well maybe not the top, but definitely some pretty good players to help me make this list. We have tested every 1860 to some degree, and today I'm going to rank them. There's only one rule for cars on this list, and that is 1860 cars only. This gets rid of the Tomahawk, the Lightning, the Kawasaki Ninja, and the Terzo Millennio. All of which, they're not really worth ranking because they can't be used in time-limited events, and if they can, they're just slow. And of course, this is opinionated to some extent. You might have a different opinion on what car goes where, but that's all you really need to know. And with that out of the way, let's go and get started with the worst car in the bracket. This technically isn't a true ranking, but the Torino. For some reason, the Torino is broken, and they have not been bothered to fix it. It goes 497 kilometers per hour when it's triple boosted, which is the speed of an unboosted 1860, which is a problem because you can be running triple boosted and the other guy can be running a nitro starter and an extra tank, and you're just gonna lose. And that's a problem, like, because they're not boosted, but you have to run boosters to get good times because everyone runs boosters. So if your boosted time is equal to an unboosted time, how the hell do you expect the car to work? Simple, you don't. It does not work. And that's why the Torino is the worst car in the bracket. Until it's fixed. Once it's fixed, it's going to be like a mid-tier vehicle. But what is the true worst vehicle? And that title goes to the Avantra Milk Valley. Avantra Milk Valley has a 6.7 Tokyo wall. So that's bad. That's like really bad. That's bad. Like 6.7 is the worst. So what does it do to compensate for this? Nothing. It does nothing. This car does not compensate in any way. It has like okay nitro, okay handling, okay drift, but it's not good handling, good drift, good nitro. It's just pointless to use this car at all. Like, I don't see any reason to use this. And same thing goes for the Huayra BC and Aston Martin Valhalla. Both of these cars are like the Mazzanti. They're relatively nice to drive, but they have a 6.7 acceleration. And I ordered them like this because apparently the Valhalla is a bit more smooth than the Huayra BC. And also, the Valhalla, I'm looking at my sheet of nitro durations, and from the looks of things, the Huayra BC has a better nitro duration than the Valhalla. And because of that alone, because these cars basically don't compensate anyway, I'm going to put the Huayra BC above the Valhalla. I'm sorry, Season. I know we said the Valhalla was going to be upper low tier, but I had to think about this. No, this is a clone of the Mazzanti and the Huayra BC. It's definitely not the worst 1860 though, because the Milica Valley, while similar, it's probably just worse because it handles a little bit less. Although, you can make an argument for the Valhalla being the worst. It's definitely not a good car. But, let's get out of these three bad cars, and then go into the Mercedes-Benz Silver Lightning. So the Silver Lightning is the only, like, rebalanced car that costs credits. And it's also the only original car that's still in S-Class. Like, every other original car is now high A at best. This is the only one that returned to S-Class. And unfortunately, just like original cars in the old days, it gets hammered down by new cars pretty badly. Granted, it's not really an old car in this instance because it was only brought in 2022. So the problem with the Silver Lightning is that it's a 6.7 wall time car, and it has speed recovery. It definitely has some semblance of speed recovery. And it has a really, really good perfect nitro. I don't know what is up with this car's perfect nitro, but at 10.25, that is insanely good. For context, that is the level of the Jesko Absolute, and the Jesko Absolute's nitro duration is broken. But that's where everything good ends, because its triple tap nitro duration is average, of course the 6.7 wall time, and then it likes to kill itself. This car has terrible physics issues. This car, like, will ride walls. I'm sure it also randomly explodes. Yeah, it's not really that good. It's not reliable. And that's a problem, because you want a reliable car for time-limited events. And even Gauntlet, because you don't want to explode randomly and lose a Gauntlet ticket, do you? You don't. So anyway, with the Silver Lightning out of the way, we have more clones. A lot of the cars in this game are clones, which is unfortunate, but I did order these clones to the best of my ability, so let's go ahead and order them. Aston Martin Valkyrie. In the original recording, I mixed up the Valhalla and the Valkyrie, and I kept calling the Valhalla the Valkyrie, which is bad. But anyway, we got the Valkyrie Mosler Land Super GT. I am struggling. I'm sorry. I'm hard struggling. Pagani Huayra R, and then last but not least, the Vision 1789. All these cars do the same thing. They're 6.6 wall times. They have bad nitro, middle of the road drifting, and really nice handling. They're all very light handling cars. But the problem is they have 6.6 acceleration and bad nitro. You want at least either good nitro or good acceleration. These cars don't have either of those. So, based on the order, you might be asking, how does that work? Well, I ordered them based on their nitro durations. At least I tried to. Like, the Land Super GT. Super GT. It's the Mosler Super GT. So the Mosler Super GT and the Aston Martin Valkyrie, they have the same triple tap nitro. The Super GT actually has a worse... No, they have the exact same nitro durations. Yeah. Exact same nitro durations. Valkyrie has a little bit worse triple tap nitro. And then the Huayra R and Vision, I think they have the same nitro duration. But I think the Vision handles just a little bit better. Or at least drifts a little bit better. And yeah, it does have a little bit better nitro duration. So there you go. That's these 4 cars ordered. There's not much else to say about them. They are all basically the same car. And they are all not really that good. Speaking of a high handling car with bad nitro, Razor Tachyon Speed. Tachyon is pretty similar to the Silver Lightning, so maybe saying it has bad nitro isn't really fair, because it still has like a 11.25 perfect nitro, which isn't phenomenal, but it's not bad at all. Not bad at all. It's obviously worse than the Silver Lightning, but again, this car does not try to kill itself on every single wall, in every single pothole, and that's definitely a plus in my book. Is it a plus to move it above the clones? Yep it is. If the Silver Lightning didn't have its physics issues, it would be better than the Razor, but the Silver Lightning just is not a reliable car. The Tachyon is, but it's still not a very strong car. I mean, this car had to be buffed before it came out, because it had the same wall time as the Skyline Special Edition, which is B class. And even after it's buffed, it's still a 6.7 wall time car. Not really that great. Speaking of not that great, unfortunately for you Mosler fanboys, the Landshark is next. The Landshark fell off so badly. Go back into 2017, watch any of those videos. You're told the Mosler Landshark's a great credit card. Try on Nemesis Alternative. Great option if you need a credit card. Fast forward to now, it has a 6.5 wall time, which is middle of the road. It has average drifting and average handling, and it has garbage nitro duration. Like, this car's nitro duration is 7.5, 12.25, 16.5. And 16.5 triple tap is the third worst in the bracket. It's behind the Apollo IE and one other car, I believe. Oh, the Valkyrie. It's behind the Valkyrie and Apollo IE in terms of bad nitro duration. And then those are behind the Vulcan. And that's only talking about the triple tap duration. You might be asking, well, just perfect nitro. But the problem with that is, in these non-ultimate cars, if you're not the 300 plus, if you're not the Yescos, if you're not the Bolide, if you're not the Arashi F10, perfect nitro slows you down. And it slows you down by a fair bit. And you will lose time on tracks. And so that's a problem that has to be considered. And even then, 12.25 is pretty average in terms of perfect nitro. So yeah, this car's got bad triple tap, average everything else, and that just drags it down to low tier. Like, it's a downgrade to the Aston Martin Vulcan. in every single aspect. And that is unfortunate for a car that used to be a Vulcan alternative. Now it's just a worse Vulcan. Anyway, moving on to a never Vulcan alternative, Renault RS01. So the RS01 is an interesting car. It's got 6.6 acceleration like the Vision, the Huayra, the Valkyrie, and the Super GT. It's got nice handling like those cars, but it has two things that are different. It's a little bit smaller, I think, than like the Huayra R, Super GT. I think it's the same size as the Vision and the Valkyrie, but even then, it has a better triple tap nitro duration than the Vision. Like, the Vision has 15.25, the RS01 has 15. It has worse perfect nitro and stuff, but again, no matter what car here, the perfect nitro is not that great, unless you're talking about the Silver Lightning or the Tachyon. But yeah, perfect nitro is kind of average. Triple tap is better than the Vision or the likes of that. So I did put it a little bit higher because I think it drifts a little bit better, and it's just a bit better nitro duration. Also, I think the small size might help it. Okay, moving on to 1860s that you will actually see somewhat. You will never see these cars. Like, you will barely see any of these cars used in multiplayer at all. You might see the Silver Lightning, but nothing else. Moving on to stuff you will see. The W Motors Fenrir Super Sport. The Fenrir is a fast car. It is the second fastest car in the game. It goes 510 kilometers per hour, which is like a little bit behind the Battista. It's probably like a decimal. Like, the Fenrir goes like 510.10. The Battista goes 510.18. So it's really fast. It's like the second fastest car in the game. It handles well. So why is it here? Oh, because it has a 6.7 acceleration, it has average drifting, and it has mediocre nitro duration at 7, 11.75, and 15.5, which is really not great. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. So you have a fast top speed, you have the handling to maintain it through corners, but you don't have the nitro duration to reach it for a long period of time. So like the Battista, it's fast and it has good nitro duration. The Fenrir does not have the nitro duration. If the Fenrir had nitro duration, I would argue this car is like the top of mid-tier, bottom of high-tier, because the speed is just that good. But because its speed is just not really usable because of how bad the nitro is, yeah, it's down here. Obviously, this car will also suffer in like time-limited races that aren't handling-based because, you know, it's got a bad acceleration. But like on handling-based tracks, this car can do pretty well. Not fantastic, but well enough. Better than the cars below it, because again, it's faster. Anyway, moving on. This is one that some may argue is unplayable. Koenigsegg Gemira. Now, LEC tells me this car is unplayable, and I agree. It's pretty damn hard to drive. But it's got a really good acceleration. 6.46, I believe, to the Tokyo wall. That is like third fastest in the entire game. That is a really fast wall time. And you cannot just overlook that. But what you can't overlook as well, like you can't overlook the 6.4 acceleration. But you can't overlook its weaknesses. Because while this car has good nitro duration and good acceleration, this car can't turn. Like, it will not turn. It does not like turning. It has terrible handling. Really bad handling. And it has an okay drifting radius. But that means you have to micro drift every corner. And the same problem with perfect nitroing every single time shows up. You are losing speed to micro drift. And you will lose ground. And because this car is still heavy, you're not taking the optimal lines with micro drift. You will have to full drift. Like, full drift for a short period of time. But that's still slower. Like, this car just suffers because of its handling. If it had better handling, it would be mid-tier. But its handling is so bad. Everything else is okay. Acceleration is correct. Nitro is pretty damn solid. The nitro is like, it's because it's a brick, it's a pretty good nitro duration. 7.25, 11.25, 14. That's pretty good. But because this car cannot turn, it cannot be ranked higher than this. I do not care. I like this car, but it cannot be higher because of how bad it handles. And that's like different from Koenigsegg's, because every other Koenigsegg handles pretty damn nicely. Speaking of a car killed by its handling, this is the end of low tier, by the way. Lamborghini Aventador SV. SV is on the verge of being a mid-tier car. Okay, it has the attributes of a mid-tier car. Okay? The SV has a 6.6 wall time. And that is average. It has average handling. It has average nitro duration. But you know what it doesn't have? An average drift radius. The drifting is so bad on this car. Like, this car has always had bad drifting, even before it got rebalanced. And that carried over. So you might say, well, that's just a reminiscent of the old times. Yeah, it is. But the drifting is also why this car was not like a Vulcan killer back in the day. At least that's what I'd like to argue. It might not be the case, but the drifting was definitely a factor in that reasoning. And to this day, the SV still can't drift very well. Everything else is nice. It handles surprisingly well, especially when you look at its drifting. If this car had better drifting, it's a mid-tier car. All day, every day. But because it has shit drifting, it is a high-end, low-tier car. And with that out of the way, that's low-tier done. I would not recommend getting any of these cars. Like, they're okay. They have some strengths, but it's not worth getting any of them. There's only one I might suggest. That'd be the Silver Lightning for its perfect nitro duration. That might help you in Gauntlet. Like, you use the Arash or the Yesco attack. You're coming up to a long stretch of straight road. You can switch to the Silver Lightning after you're switching to perfect nitro in the ultimate cars. And then you're cruising with really good nitro. But if the car blows up, it's not really going to help you. But with that out of the way, let's move on to mid-tier. Okay, let's begin mid-tier, starting with the Bugatti Chiron. So picture everything I said about the Gemera, and have that upgraded to some extent. Actually, no, take that back. Because this car has a worse wall time than the Gemera. It has worse nitro duration, but it handles a little bit better, and I believe it has a little bit better speed recovery. And wall time is not even that bad. It's a low 6.5. Which is pretty close to the Gemera's 6.46. So it's not that much slower than the Gemera in terms of acceleration. And it handles just a little bit better. Its drifting is still not great, but its nitro duration is still alright. The nitro is worse than the Gemera, don't get that wrong, but it's not worse enough to kill it. At 6, 11, 15. Like, that's worse than the Gemera, but it's not terribly bad. It's just average. But because this car handles just a little bit better, I figured that was justifiable to put it above. And speaking of a very average car, Ajlani Dracuma. The Dracuma has one crazy statistic. The design, which is kind of ugly. At least if you ask me. Everything else is average. 6.6 acceleration, average. Very average nitro duration. The nitro is not special. It at 6.75, 10.75, 15.5. That's all average. It's like the nitro is a bit below average if you consider the triple tap, but it's still average. The handling is average. The drift is average. The speed recovery doesn't exist, but you know what? That's pretty average for most cars. This is literally just a mid-tier vehicle. And you know what else is just a mid-tier vehicle? The 48 Pista. Everything I said about the Ajlani, except for one stat, applies to the Pista. The Pista actually looks better than the Ajlani. And the nitro duration, however, let's take a look at that. At 8, 11.5, 14.5, it has worse perfect nitro. It has worse perfect nitro, I just said that. And worse single tap nitro than the Ajlani, but better triple tap. But two things. First of all, its perfect nitro is not that much worse. And two, you don't use blue nitro in non-ultimate cars. So really, this car is just a little bit better because its nitro will be just a little bit easier to manage. And by a little bit, I mean a fair amount, because Angelini at 15.5 versus the Pista at 14.5. Yeah, that's a pretty nice difference. But Pista is still an average car. Now, you want to know a car that's going to piss off a lot of people when I put it on the list? Aston Martin Vulcan. I'm sorry, the Vulcan is a pointless car now. Everything on this car is similar to the Centenario. I think it has a little bit better downforce, but that's about it. It's got the same old 6.5 wall time. Let me fact check that. I'm pretty sure it's 6.5. Let me find it on my list. Where the heck is it? I found it. Yeah, 6.5 wall time. Average. Like the Centenario, which is also 6.5. It has sharp drifting. Sharp-ish, like the Centenario. It's not really sharp anymore. It's average now. It handles a little bit worse than the Centenario if you ask me, but that's really driver dependent, I suppose. Still, average handling. But this car, so nitro duration, is 7.25, 11.5. That's average. Triple tap, 17. 17 is the worst in the entire bracket. You might argue it's manageable, just perfect nitro. What did I say on the Super GT? And by Super GT I meant land chart. I keep mixing them up. But what did I say on the land chart? You can't perfect nitro every single time or you lose speed. But the Vulcan cannot triple tap because it will run out of nitro quickly. It runs out faster than any other vehicle in the bracket. Of course, if everyone's perfect nitroing, then the Vulcan will do okay. But not everyone's gonna perfect nitro. Like, a Devel is not gonna perfect nitro. A Vantage 2022 is not gonna perfect nitro. A Cento DAC is not gonna perfect nitro. A Devo is not gonna perfect nitro. A Speedtail is not gonna perfect nitro every single time. The Vulcan has to. It will die on long tracks. It even dies on some short tracks because of its nitro being that poor. Like, this car cannot complete Dubai without... It cannot complete it without using perfect nitro at least like 1-2 times. 300 Plus, I'm sure you also have to use it like 1-2 times. But you could still probably do it with triple tap 300 Plus. Granted, that's an ultimate car. This isn't. But the point still stands. The Vulcan's nitro is just bad. And it's so bad that this car is this slow. Want to know another car that has a stat that's just so bad it kills it? Koenigsegg Regera. I don't know if the Regera got nerfed or not. Apparently it did. So this car has a 6.78 wall time. This is the worst in the bracket. Again, like the Vulcan, worse in the bracket. Unlike the Vulcan, which literally cannot keep its speed up, the Regera can never catch up because every car has the same speed. You have to accelerate faster. The Regera does not. However, its speed recovery is pretty decent, and it's a fast car. It is, I believe, the 3rd or 4th fastest car in the game. Let me find my list. The Regera is the 4th fastest in the game. That is pretty damn good. And unlike the Fenner, it does have the nitro duration to back it up. So, the only true bad stats on this car are its initial acceleration and its drifting. Its drifting is a bit wide. Handling is not the greatest, but it's not terrible. And the nitro duration, at a solid 5.75, 11, 15.5, that's a very average, perfect nitro duration. Not perfect nitro. Perfect nitro is also pretty average. But yeah, it's just a pretty average nitro duration. Pretty alright handling. It's fast, it has good recovery. It does not have acceleration. But because it has good recovery and a good speed, this car can do pretty damn well in sprints. Because sprints do not require you to have good acceleration. Good recovery, or a high raw top speed, is what you need. And the Regera has a good recovery and a high top speed. Not a high raw top speed, but a high raw speed. It does not have a high raw speed. It has a high top speed. So yeah, pretty okay car. Just don't use it in lap times. It will die. Now, moving on. Bailey Blade GT1 SE. The Blade is really similar to like the RS01, the Vision, the Huayra R, the Super GT, and the Valkyrie. There is one key difference though. Well, two. First of all, it's tiny, so it's easy to drive. Or it's at least smaller. It won't get bonked around as easily in multiplayer. it could probably do maybe a little bit easier speed tricks in like time limit events or gauntlet, because smaller car means easier to maneuver. But this car also drifts a lot better than those cars. Those cars don't drift well at all. This car has average drifting. Not average, I would say above average. I'd say it's like a bit below Centenario level, but still pretty good. And because it drifts well, it's above the other cars. Because the nitro duration's still the same, the handling's still the same. Downforce I think might be a little bit better, but otherwise pretty average car. Thank God it drifts, otherwise it would be low tier. Now obviously, Cody, we all know the Bailey is actually here, but because not everyone is like Cody, I have to put it in mid tier. Anyway, moving on, we're gonna put the Arash AF10. The AF10 is bad, okay? It has bad acceleration, bad handling, bad drift. I'd say maybe it's average drift, average handling, average nitro duration, but bad acceleration. So you might be saying, this car doesn't compensate on anything. Why isn't it in low tier with the Mazzanti or the Valhalla or the Huera? Well, because it has one stat. Raw speed. Raw speed is the most broken stat in the game. I don't care about speed recovery. Speed recovery is really good, but raw speed is broken. Raw speed opens you to so many things. For one, the Arash can drift faster than every other car so far. Like, it will drift faster than the Bailey. It'll drift faster than the Vulcan. It'll drift faster than the Silver Lightning. It just drifts faster because its raw speed is higher. 2, you can use Blue Nitrous. And Blue Nitrous opens you to easier handling. Because Nitro in this game, depending on the power, it makes your car harder to turn. So if you use Blue Nitrous on this car, it can turn easier. And that goes for every car. But because not every car has raw speed, they can't do it. Like, an Ultimate car can go 501 on Blue Nitro. Ultimate car minus the Agera RS. But any other Ultimate car goes 501 on Perfect Nitro. Or no, Blue Nitro. Every other car goes like 482, 490 something. Basically, they're not fast enough. You will get passed by any other car. Arash is just fast enough to fight the other car. Like, if you have a lead in Gauntlet or Sprint and use Blue Nitro in the Arash, you'll hold on to that lead, or at least it'll get taken away, but you'll still be in contention. Every other car can't do that. This car can also break triple nitro because of raw speed. Every raw speed car has a good braked triple nitro. It basically, from what I can tell, brake triple nitro stalls your speed drop after like a jump. So like, let's say you land at like 520 kilometers per hour, you brake triple nitro, you'll hold a 520 for like maybe a second longer, which will let you go a little bit faster, which is obviously a good trait to have. But if you take away the raw speed, this car is low tier, because it is not good at anything else. But the raw speed is really, really important. Next up, a Spark Owl. No, it's above the Arash. Owl is pretty okay. Let's talk about the good stuff. It's got like the 4th best speed recovery in the game. It's behind the Nevera, the DEUS Vayanne, the Faraday, and the Batista. So yeah, 5th best recovery in the game. And its nitro duration is really nice. 7, 10.5, 13.5. 13.5 is 2nd best in the bracket. 10.5 perfect nitro is the best in the bracket. Actually no. It's the 2nd best in the bracket, but it's only behind the Yesko Absolute. So Owl's got really good nitro duration. Good recovery. So you might be asking, well, it's like a nerfed Batista, why isn't it high tier? Oh, because it can't turn or drift. Batista, Nevera, they counteract their bad, they counteract their bad handling or stuff with good drifting, or they counteract their bad handling with good drifting. I don't know what I'm saying. Faraday has best drifting in the game. Owl does not. Obviously, the DEUS doesn't either, but we'll talk about those high tier cars later. Right now, we're talking about the Owl. Owl cannot drift, and that's a problem because it cannot turn either. Obviously, the Chimera can't turn, but it can drift. But the Owl turns better than the Chimera. So that's why the Owl is mid-tier. Because it's got a good recovery, good nitro, but the inability to turn or drift quickly does negatively affect this car. Anyway, moving on. Did you know when you buy this car, you get to name it because it's so bespoke? So I've decided to name mine the Naran mid-tier because the Naran is mid. So what is there to the Naran? Well, there's a 6.5 wall time, pretty average. The nitro duration is 7, 11.25, 15.5, pretty average. It's got okay drifting, okay handling. It's a bit of a boat, kind of. But again, it has better acceleration, better nitro duration than that of the Agilani. It's meant to be like a good nitro-focused car, but obviously its triple tap's not that great. Perfect nitro is pretty good, not fantastic, not terrible. I would just say pretty good. But other than that, it's a pretty average car. And remember how I said the Owl has the second best perfect nitro in the bracket? I'll scratch that because the Absolute does. But the Absolute had the first? No, it didn't. Because I made a mistake. The best perfect nitro is from the Vantage 2022. This car is hilarious because it was on sale for 1,400 tokens. But for what you get, it's a pretty solid car. 7.75, 10, 14.5 nitro duration. Perfect nitro is the best in the bracket, and 14.5 is above average. However, this car suffers from the same issues as the Naran mid-tier. It does not really have that great of handling and drifting. Of course, these two cars, the Naran and the Vantage, handle better than the Jimera. They handle better than the Owl. They drift better than those two cars, and they both have some semblance of speed recovery. So they are obviously better than those two cars, but they're not that great because they still struggle to handle. Not saying they handle terribly, they handle okay. Not fantastically though. Now remember how I said the Agilani is the definition of average? Well, what's the definition of above average? That would get you the McLaren Speedtail. Speedtail has a 6.5 wall time. That is average. I mean, it's average now, but like that back in the day, that used to be above average. And that's what most good cars have, a 6.5 wall time. It has either average to no recovery, even then, if it doesn't have recovery, it's still average. And the nitro duration is, once again, average at a beautiful 7, 11, 14.5. It's like the Vantage, but better single tap nitro and worse perfect nitro. So, it's a very average car in terms of nitro duration, handling, drifting. It's good, but it's average. But because it's good at basically everything, this car is really versatile. And versatility does definitely help a car rank higher on this list. But obviously, every car above this is going to have some sort of cheese. And because of that, I felt like it doesn't make sense to put the Speedtail higher. Speedtail is a great car. I use it whenever I don't know what to use in time limited event. Like, let's say there's an event for, like, Nevada, I'm struggling with the 300 plus. I'll just use the Speedtail. It should get me all the prizes. I mean, that's what I used during the 9th Anniversary Cup. I used Speedtail to get the prizes. And it worked. So yeah, Speedtail is just a dependable car you can rely on for anything. Anyway, now I said we're moving on to cars with some level of cheese. And by cheese, I mean something good. And we're going to start with the HTC Plus 4. So the Plus 4 has the 6.5 wall time like the Speedtail. It's got average-ish nitro duration. But this car is a fairly good drifting radius. Like, it's not the sharpest thing in the world, but it's not wide. It's not average. Like, average, I'd say Speedtail, likes of that. It is definitely sharper to some extent than the Speedtail. Not by much, I'd say. It's still sharp, though. Like, this car could be used on Munich as, like, the third car to go up the spiral. Obviously, it's not going to be the best option, but it will work. But, other than that, it's a pretty okay car. Like, everything else is average. The drift is good. Speaking of average cars with good drifting, the Zenvo TS1. Except the TS1 has even better drifting than the HTT. The Zenvo's drifting is insanely good. If you watched my video on the Zenvo TS1 when it got buffed, I drifted up Rooftop Raceway, and I was like, what is this drift? Because this car does not look like it should drift well. It's pretty average. 6.5 wall time. Average. Nitro duration of, is it even on my list? Let's see. Yes, it is. 6.5, 11, 16. Average nitro duration. Average handling. Average acceleration. but it drifts. It drifts so well. Like, the drifting on this car is amazing. I love how this car drifts. It's not the best in the game, but it's definitely comparable to the Koenigsegg 1-to-1, which makes sense because, well, it was rebalanced in the same time as the Koenigsegg 1-to-1. So, if it didn't have the drifting, it would be really just like above the Vulcan, behind the Regera probably. But because it drifts really well, I have to put it up here because the drifting is amazing. Anyway, moving on. McLaren 600 LT. 600 LT is pretty nice. Let's start with the back. 6.682 wall time. Terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. I don't like it. Because this car's acceleration is fender level. Everyone loves to take a poo on the fender for how bad its acceleration is. But when it comes to the 600 LT, oh no, nobody cares about how bad its acceleration is. But on a standalone list like this, it has to be considered. And its acceleration is awful. Everything else is actually pretty good though. 6, 11.5, 15 next generation, that's above average. It's got good, really good handling, good drifting, but it has bad downforce, bad recovery, bad acceleration. So yeah, it's here, but you know, it handles really well. So it might do okay in sprints that are handling based. Not that those really exist, and the ones that do still require some level of speed recovery. So yeah, it's otherwise an okay car. I'd say it's not really as useful as it used to be. If it got nerfed today, I don't think as many people would be crying. Because when this car was going to get nerfed, people were crying. It was a bit confusing to me because it's going to be lower than the 570S for what reason? I don't know. Anyway, moving on from that, we have the DeVal 16 prototype. Where is it? Here. So I was originally going to have the DeVal a little bit higher, but I decided to move it down. Because the DeVal is broken. In both ways. It's broken two ways. This car is nuts. 6.4 wall time. That's fast as hell. Good recovery. Rare for an acceleration-based car. And then the nitro duration is so good. 6.5, 10, 13. Best perfect nitro in the bracket. Best triple tap nitro in the bracket. And the best single tap nitro in the bracket, I believe. I'm looking at my list. 6.5 is not the best. 6 is actually the best. But it doesn't matter, because who is using single tap nitro? And even then, this car has raw speed. It has a 44 raw speed, which means you could probably use single tap nitro on this car. It's not gonna do as well as the 300 Plus, the Esco Attack, the Esco Absolute, etc. But it's gonna do better than the TS1. It's gonna do better than Vulcan, Regera, etc. It's above everything else but the 1862 Ultimate cars in the Arash F10. However, it's broken in those ways, and it's also broken in handling, because the DeVal cannot turn. It cannot drift. It is so bad. I have never seen a car that handles this bad. But unlike the Jimura, which really doesn't compensate for this, the DeVal does, because it has that raw speed. The raw speed is why the DeVal is in mid-tier, and the Jimura is low-tier, because raw speed is important. Also, there's the fact the DeVal has better nitro duration than the Jimura. But yeah, if a straight track shows up, like Westminster Bridge or Tokyo, DeVal is broken. DeVal is only going to lose to the 300 Plus, the Jesko Absolute, and the Batista. I think it can beat everything else. It might get contested by the Faraday, but that's against the point. But on Twisties, this car's dead. This car is probably worse than the Torino on Twisties, because it cannot turn. Like, the Torino will probably beat this car in asterisks, because the DeVal will have to drift every single turn. Torino can probably micro-drift the first corners. So yeah, DeVal, straight tracks, it's a top tier. Every other track, it's unviable. And that's why it's mid-tier. Because this car is like the Crom of Smash Ultimate, but Asphalt. Crom in Smash Ultimate, really good at everything but recovery. DeVal, really good at everything but handling. So moving on, Tushek. Which one will I choose? TS900 Racer Pro. The Racer Pro is pretty good. 6.5 wall time, that's nice. Good handling, good drifting. recovery. But what kills this car is its nitro duration at... I was about to read the Apex's nitro duration. No, we're looking for the Racer Pro. Racer Pro's nitro duration is kind of poo-poo. At 6.7, 11.5, 15.25. Okay, it's not as bad as I thought. But it's not... It's actually not as bad. It really isn't as bad. Like, bad I'd say is Square or Vulcan, Super GT, Lancer, etc. This car's a bit better than those. It's not great, but it's not bad either. It's like average, but again, its nitro duration is not fantastic. And it's just, there's not much to say about the TS900 Racer Pro. If it had better nitro, it'd be higher. Because, like, it's a Centenario clone with worse nitro duration. And obviously, we saw what happened to the Vulcan. Vulcan is kind of low tier. Not low tier, but it's low mid tier because of its nitro duration. So there you go. Tushek TS900 Racer Pro, right here. Moving on, Bugatti Vision Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo has nothing really that fantastic to write home about. It's a smooth handling car. It has, I believe, a 6.5 wall time. It does not drift that great. Nitro is not that great either. But it's a pretty average car. And now that I'm thinking about it, because it does not drift that well, I'm going to put it below the TS900 Racer Pro. Because, obviously, it's just not drifting as well. If it drifted a little bit better, be higher up, but it doesn't. And the example of a car drifting a little bit better, and being higher for it, is the brand new Pagani Utopia. Utopia screwed me over because I could not find anyone who owned it. Thank you, Gold Bomber, for sending me the photo, and thank you, Friddle, for the races. So Utopia is very similar to the Vision Gran Turismo. 6.5 wall time, smooth handling, kind of nitro duration, but it drifts better. It drifts a lot better. And because it's, I think, just a bit better in nitro duration than the TS900 Racer Pro, it's above the TS900 Racer Pro on the tier list. Anyway, that's that. Moving on, we have a car that really did not need a readjustment. MP431. So, I had the MP431 on this list before, when it was 1853. And you know where it was? It was here. It was mid-tier. Upper mid-tier too. Because back then it had 6.7 wall time. Bad nitro. But insanely good handling. Decent drift. Not the greatest recovery. But when they rebalanced it, they killed its handling. Its nitro is still not great, but it's different. Because now this car drifts really well. And it apparently has an okay speed recovery. So this car went from handling king to downgraded Faraday. And to make matters worse, this car is still a 6.7 wall time car. So the only reason it's not in low tier is because the drift is broken. It's really good at drifting. Really good. But there is no reason to readjust it because it has the same placement as it did before, if not a little bit lower. And then moving on from a car that really did not need a readjustment to a car that really needed one, CCXR Trevita. For some reason, they made the CCXR really good. The CCXR has really good acceleration, 6.4 acceleration, really fast. Good recovery. It's a Spark Owl level recovery, so top 5 recovery in the game. Good handling, good drifting. Only bad stat is the nitro duration. I cannot check the nitro duration right now because my phone just died, and that's what I was looking at the data tables for. I'll post an image of the CCXR's nitro duration right here, if I remember. So aside from its bad nitro duration, this car is really solid. But you have to look at nitro duration as a problem, because it is. You can't go very well on long tracks with a bad nitro duration. And the CCXR does not have that great of nitro duration. And that's why it's here. Still, a very good car if you're looking for a first S-Class car. And this is not a bad option. Some people might say Centenario or Arash. Arash is apparently off sale. And from time to time, it's off sale, I think. And it's not that fantastic in the long scheme. I mean, I guess it's okay for free-to-play players. Because it's the only ultimate you'll get. And then Centenario is the only other option. Centenario has bad recovery. bad micro drifting. CCXR has okay micro drifting from what I'd like to say. Also, it recovers better, so it sacrifices recovery. And no, takes recovery in exchange for nitro duration. So really, whether you want Centenario or CCXR, it's up to you. CCXR is a pretty good car. I would recommend it. Speaking of really good Koenigsegg's, Agera RS. Agera RS, everything I said about the CCXR can almost be applied to the Agera RS, but take one thing out, speed recovery, because this car does not have good speed recovery, but it has, it also doesn't have good acceleration. I believe it's like a 6.6 wall time, so it's a bit average, but this car has raw speed, not that good of raw speed, like the Vel raw speed tire or Rash raw speed tire. This is the lowest raw speed in the game, at least in the bracket, not game, but in the bracket, it's the lowest raw speed. But that still means it drifts faster than other cars. But it's not. Its drifting is not sharp. It's good, not sharp. So, you know, they can drift like wideish turns fine. But take this car to like Market Square, Rooftop Raceway, or Terra 9, I think it's Cloud Top Avenue. Yeah, this car won't cut it. Even though it has the raw speed. Its drifting is just not tight enough. I mean, if it had better nitro duration, it'd be a high tier car. The drifting is fine. But the nitro duration killed it. That's what truly kills it. Like, the drifting having raw speed will counteract its kind of wide radius. But because its nitro duration is not good, it just does not survive at all. Even with its raw speed. Like, yeah, it drifts good. But you drift good, then you're in a long straight, you run out of nitro, you lose to a plethora, or you lose to a Vantage. And that's a problem. That's a problem that needs to be realized. And moving on, 2018 McLaren X2. X2 is above the MP431 because the X2 still has a use. The MP431, after its rebalance, it's pretty much useless because it's a worse Faraday future. And the Faraday is like the best car for so many people. Why would you get the MP431? There's no argument for that. Obviously, still a good car, just it's not really worth getting anymore. X2 has like very, very, very small use. It's losing its use pretty fast. But it does have some uses. It can still micro drift, I think, a little bit better than the X2. I think it handles... Did I just say it? Of course it handles like the X2. It is the X2. I think it might handle a little bit better than the MP431. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it also doesn't have the 6.7 acceleration. That means you can actually use it as an accelerator for some tracks. It's not really the accelerator for Orbital Loop anymore. It lost Asteroid Chase to the Esco Absolute. It lost Escape Velocity to the... I think the Esco Absolute and FF01. I don't think it ever owned Satellite Rush. I think Bolide was always better in Satellite Rush. I think the only track you use this car first in is the Tidal Clash and King's Highway, maybe. But the thing is, you can just use the Bolide first. I mean, obviously the Bolide's a lot more expensive than the X2, but it is definitely something to look at. Especially when I can just say, I use the Vulcan versus the Tidal first. Most people use the FF01. So the X2 is losing its use really fast. It has that one use on its Tidal Clash. And that's the only reason it's above the MP431. And that's the only reason it's above the Agera RS and CCXR Tribute. Because it's still a handling specialist. It'll still do better than those two cars on like handling-based tracks. Not by much, but it still has that one use. It's a Tidal Clash gun. Anyway, let's go ahead and almost finish high tier. One more car before the last in high tier. Or in mid tier. Mid tier, not high tier. We have two cars left. And the first one is the Senna. Senna is very similar to the 600 LT, but better in a few ways. It has the good nitro duration, good handling, good drift, but it has 6.64 acceleration. So it's a little bit faster than the 600 LT, and it also has better downforce. And the reason it has better acceleration than the 600 LT is because it has better speed recovery. And the speed recovery is not fantastic. It's not terrible either. 600 LT speed recovery is basically not there. Senna slightly has speed recovery, and that's why it accelerates a little bit faster than the 600 LT. And that's why it's quite a few cars above the 600 LT. I'm actually looking at it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cars above the 600 LT because it has good downforce and good recovery. And wrapping up mid-tier, we have the remake Navara. Navara, really nice car. I think it's the 4th or 5th fastest car in the game. No, it's definitely not the 4th. I think that, no, Regera's it goes Fenner, no, it goes Battista, Fenner, Faraday, Regera. Okay, Navara is the 5th car in terms of top speed. It's the 5th fastest car in the game. It has the, is it the 3rd? No, it's the 4th best speed recovery in the game. It's behind the not Owl, it's behind the Battista, the Faraday, and the DEUS Vayanne. It has a decent handling, well, no, not decent handling. Its handling is kind of bad. Has decent drifting, though, and good nitro duration. It's a pretty solid car. It's like a downgrade to the Battista, I'd say. Battista is still a really good car. Navara is also a really good car. Like, if Battista did not exist, the thing is, Navara would have the Battista's use, and the Navara would be like top tier. But because Battista exists, Navara cannot be top tier, because it does not have uses. Obviously, we're looking at how well the car performs, but also looking at the uses the car has is part of this. And that's why, again, MP431 is below the X2, because MP431 has no use anymore. Navara does not have uses as much, but it can work. If you don't have the Battista or the Faraday, this is your best recovery car. This is the best option. And with that, that is mid-tier. These cars, I'd say, like, the ones that start recommending are from, like, the Regera and above. Like, Vulcan and below, I wouldn't recommend still. Like, you can get them, they'll do okay, but they're not going to be fantastic. Obviously, they're better than the low-tier cars, but they're not, like, you're not going to use them after a while. Everything else, there's an argument to use. Like, Regera's recovery, or Navara's recovery, or Bailey's handling and drifting, or Arash's raw speed, Owl's nitro duration, Vantage's nitro duration, the Vel's broken stats with the exception of handling, MP431's drifting and recovery, Utopia's good drifting and handling. There's an argument for every car above the Vulcan. Even the Vulcan has arguments. Even the Pista. There's no argument for the Edgelane. If you use that car, you need to go get your eyes checked. Anyway, let's move on to high tier. Okay, before we move on to high tier, I have decided to make a change to the list before I move on. So first things first, Navara is actually going to go into high tier, because high tier, top tier, these are the top 20 cars in the game. And Navara is certainly better than the car I was gonna put here, which is the Cento DAC. And Cento DAC is not gonna go here. No, I was thinking about this. I came to the conclusion. Why the hell was the Cento DAC so high? It was because of the acceleration, but here's the thing. 6.4, like, that's good. Like, that's really good. Like, it's obviously lower than the Urge Plus, but it's, like, equal to the CCXR, equal to the Devel, equal to the Jamira. But this car doesn't really offer that much over those cars. In fact, I'm actually going to put it here, behind the Devel. Because while it has that good acceleration, the other cars do too. And its nitro duration is a bit worse than the Devel. And the nitro duration on this car is, I'm trying to find it, it's 711, 14.25, which is okay. That's pretty good, actually. It's not fantastic, though. It's a downgrade of the Chiron Hypersport 300 Plus. But that does not mean it's actually in high tier, because it's just worse than the Devel. It's worse than the CCXR Trevita. It's worse than those cars. It's definitely worse than the Navara. I don't know why I put the Navara in mid tier. Navara is a definite car in high tier. It does not deserve mid tier in any way, shape, or form. Well, it kind of does. You can make the argument for it, but we're looking at the top 20 cars for high and top tier. So yeah. Navara is going to move into high tier, and Cento DAC is going to go down to mid tier. And actually, I'm going to put one car behind the Navara, and that's going to be the Centenario. Actually, no, I'm going to put the Centenario above. Never mind. I decided to put Centenario above. Centenario is the epitome of versatility. It has a 6.5 wall time, a low 6.5, which is pretty good. Has sharp drifting radius, which is pretty good. Has nice handling, pretty good. But it can't recover speed, and it apparently can't micro drift. And those are some pretty big kind of flops. But again, this car is still really balanced. Nitro drift is still pretty good. 7, 10.5, 13.5. That's actually pretty damn good. But of course, the lack of micro drifting and recovery is what knocks this car down a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a fair amount. Because this car is still pretty good. Like, there's like, this list, or the entirety of Hydra, is like Centenario clones. And if you don't believe me, let me get the next car. Tryon Nemesis. Actually, it's not the Tryon. Hold on. Put the Tryon back. Follow my Twitter. Next up, we have the Apollo Intensa Emozione. IE has the second worst triple tap nitro in the bracket. You know how I said the Vulcan has the worst at 17? Well, the IE has the second worst at 16.75. Obviously, the same problem on the Vulcan applies here. You can't perfect nitro every quarter because you lose speed. But here's the difference. The IE, well, first of all, it has worse perfect nitro, but that's not the difference. The difference is the IE's drifting and handling are insane. The handling and drifting of this car are so good. They are better than the Centenario. They are better than the Vulcan. And this makes the car really good on some tracks. Like, this car, despite its bad nitro duration, held the world record for rooftop raceway. And it was faster than the Tryon. But I'm going to rank the Tryon higher because of raw speed. We'll talk about the Tryon a little bit more later. This car had the record for rooftop until the Faraday came out. This car was so close to meta. It's such a good car. Even though it has terrible nitro, everything else is super strong. Of course, minus speed recovery. But that's kind of normal for most gas-powered cars. Anyway, I said I was going to put the Tryon next. Yeah, Tryon's next. Tryon is very similar to the IE. Both have 6.5 wall time. Both have really nice handling and drifting. Both have nitro durations. But the Tryon has two things. First of all, it has better nitro duration than the Apollo IE. Not by much. It's 7.25, 12, 16, which is actually a little bit better than the IE in every aspect, but not by much. And second, this car has raw speed, which means it drifts faster and it can perfect nitro. Not really that well. It'll still perfect nitro faster than the Apollo IE. And that's why we're going to put the Tryon Nemesis above the Apollo IE. Anyway, those are the bad Nitro Centenario clones. Let's talk about some good Nitro Centenario clones. Starting with the Lamborghini Sian FKP37. Do you guys know how to actually pronounce this car's name? Because I don't. Anyway, that doesn't matter. What matters is how the car drives. It's like the Centenario. 6.5 wall time, good nitro duration, good. And that's it. That's it, actually. I don't know what I was going to say about what else, but that's it. Good acceleration and good nitro. Because the Cyan is a little bit different from the Centenario. Yeah, their nitro duration is about the same. And let me figure out what a Cyan is. Yes, Cyan is actually a little bit better nitro duration, believe it or not. 6, 11, and 14.5 versus the Centenario's 7, 10.5, 13.5. So actually it has worse nitro duration. It has worse, because no one's using single tap nitro. It has worse perfect and triple tap nitro. But the Cyan has better speed recovery. And that's why it's above the Centenario, because Centenario can't recover speed. Cyan can't drift, but Cyan can recover speed. So the Cyan has more use. Like Centenario, yeah, it's cool now, but get the Tryon, get the Apollo IE. Hell, even get the Senna at that point. Cyan, you could theoretically make an argument for. Like, let's say you have the Devo, and you have, like, let's say, what's a good track to judge on? Let's say you have, like, London. Devo's gonna struggle to the start to some extent. It'll do alright, but it'll still struggle. You can use the Cyan. Cyan is a more reliable acceleration-based car. But, again, it's not fantastic at acceleration anymore. Still a pretty good car. Pretty well-rounded car. It definitely belongs in high tier. I definitely like driving it. It's boring, but it's not terribly boring. It's not like a total snooze fest. Actually, it might as well be a snooze fest. Anyway, more Centenario clones. Tushek TS900 Apex. That's the first one. Very good drifting. Good nitro duration, 7.5, 10.5, 14.5. That's a pretty solid nitro duration. Like, that's solid. There's nothing wrong with that. Worst triple dimension scenario, equal perfect nitro, but it's just a little bit better at drifting. Like, a lot better, never mind. It's a lot better. At least I would say. And then, you know what's better than the TS900 Apex? The Lykan Hypersport Halloween Edition. Now, this car is not just nitro duration, but nitro effects. And I kind of spoiled what I was going to say. Because its nitro effects relate to the strongest out of the car. Because statistically, it's a Centenario performance. Just like the Centenario in TS900 Apex. Good drifting, good acceleration, not the greatest recovery, but this car's nitro duration is insane. 7, 10.5, 13.75. That is insanely good. That is like the third best triple tap nitro duration in the bracket. That is the second best, not second best, that is the third best perfect nitro in the bracket, and that is really good. This car will probably never run out of nitro in any scenario. This car can nitro well, and unlike the DEUS, it can handle well. Obviously, this car does not have the raw speed of the DEUS, but everything else is really solid. Really good car for any track, except for like maybe recovery-based tracks, especially if you don't have raw speed. But this car, really dependable, really solid. You can use it for almost any track. It'll do great. It doesn't look fantastic though, at least that's my opinion. It definitely is a Halloween edition, to say the least. And that is basically the end of the high tier, because the last 3 cars are just clones. We're going to go ahead and put them as the Voiture Noir, the Bugatti Chiron Sport 110 ANS, and the Bugatti Divo. All of these cars are the exact same. They all have good acceleration, good speed recovery, decent drifting, terrible handling, and good nitro duration. I've actually ordered them based on the nitro duration because they actually have like a little pecking order of nitro duration. La Voiture Noir is 6.5, 10.75, and 14. The Chiron Sport 110 ANS is 7, 11, 14.25. So it's just a little bit better than triple tap nitro. Actually, no. No, it's not. Huh. I don't know why the 110 ANS is higher then. La Voiture Noir clearly has a higher nitro duration. Okay, 110 ANS is moving back. But the Devo is higher than both of them. The Devo is at, let's find it. Why is this list so not organized? Oh, Devo is at 7, 10.5, 13.5. So it is definitely better than the Voiture Noir and the 110 ANS. Like, both of them cannot compete with nitro duration in terms of the Devo. And in addition, the Devo has the best speed recovery of the 3. So the Devo is definitely the most useful of the 3. And that's that for high tier. I mean, all these 3 cars here are basically the same. Then basically everything here is a Centenario. And then there's the Navara, which I moved up just now because, let's be honest, Cento DAC did not belong here in any way, shape, or form. Anyway, let's move on to top tier now. Welcome to top tier. Every car from here on out is a car you should probably have in your garage. That also probably means they're expensive because Gameloft knows what the top tiers are. And of course, we have top 5, but it's top 6 because nobody could agree. So let's go and get started with top tier, which is the top 10. Again, follow my little Twitter. Okay, Ferrari FX... I didn't even grab it. Ferrari FXXK. FXXK is here because it is a Centenario clone. You might be saying, then why is it better than the Diva, the Voiture Noir, 110 ANS? Oh, because it has speed recovery. Now you might be asking, well, why is it better than the CN? Because the CN cannot drift. The FXXK can. FXXK has good drifting and good handling still. Its nitro duration is just average, however, at 7, 11, 15.5. It's not terrible. It's not bad. It's just average. I wouldn't call it great nitro duration. It does definitely struggle with nitro. So yeah, I'd definitely say it's like average, below average, lower average, I would say. That's probably the best term, lower average. But has good recovery. Really good recovery. Apparently it got buffed. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not gonna say it's buffed yet. So there you go. FXXK, top tier. Starting off. Next up is another handling-based recovery car, Ultima RS. Ultima is insane. The handling is so good. The speed recovery is so good. The downforce is really good. The drifting is worse than the FX6K, but that doesn't matter because everything else is just stronger. Maybe not acceleration, but recovery is definitely stronger. And downforce is stronger. Is nitro duration stronger? I believe so. At 7.75, 11.25, 15. Yep, it's got a stronger nitro duration than the FX6K. So the only thing the FX6K has on the Ultima is drifting, and I guess perfect nitro, but again, perfect nitro is not really the best thing to do in these cars, and it's not even that much better than the Ultima. So yeah, Ultima belongs here. Really good handling, really good recovery. It's a rare combo. No other car really has that, except for the CCXR, which is not as strong, and the FX6K, which is, again, not as strong. And moving on, we have the Koenigsegg 1-to-1. 1-to-1 is unnecessarily broken. I know it took me 30 minutes to win with this car before it got buffed, but oh my gosh, they really went out and made this car good. So let's start with the mid. Like, the mid on this car is, there's like one thing. Well, two actually. There is the acceleration, which I believe is 6.5, 6.6. That is definitely mid. And the nitro duration is mid at 7, 11, 16. That's just run of the mill. But this car has raw speed. It is the second highest that's not an ultimate car. So, like, it's only behind the Vel in terms of high raw speed. Only behind the Vel. But the Vel cannot drift. This car's drifting is so good. It drifts so well. It can micro pretty well. It handles pretty well. It can drift really well. So this car is the best option for, like, a rooftop raceway. It probably works better or as good as the Faraday as Market Square 3rd. It can dominate rooftop raceway leaderboards. And this car is a contender for the Mosaic Motorway world record because the drifting on this car is so good, and the start of that track is a drift. So you drift down that with because you're going faster because of your raw speed. You just pass everything else. Like the Absolute won't keep up with you because it can't drift as well, or the Faraday won't keep up with you because it can't drift as fast, or the FX6K, same thing, it won't drift as fast. Broken car. This car is like, if this car comes on sale for 4 million fusion coins, get it. If you have a master key, get it, because this car is the best thing you'll get out of a master key. Because everything else on this list, everything else is, I believe, 1862 or 1864. So this is the best, not 1862 car in the game. In my opinion, and in most other people's opinion, this car is busted. So good. Get it if you don't have it. Pro it if you don't have it pro'd yet. And then the last car in the top 10 that isn't actually an undisputed top 5 car is the Pininfarina Battista. Battista has really good stuff. For one, fastest car in the game, 510.18. That's really fast. I mean, obviously it's the fastest car in the game. 2, really good nitro duration, 6.25, 10.5, 13.75. Really good nitro duration, really reliable for that. 3, good speed recovery. It's the 3rd best in the game. 4, good drifting. It does not handle well, but it drifts good enough. I would not obviously use this car as like a spiral drifter, but it does drift enough to the point where you can use it as like I don't know, like, let's see. I'm trying to think. You could probably use it fourth on like wall ascent. I mean, you probably shouldn't because it works better as a, second car. But, good recovery, good speed, good for sprints, good drifting, makes it pretty reliable for sprints as well. Because like on ALPS, you can drift that corner and get through just fine. What is there to say that's bad about this car? I mean, not much. Handling's the only bad thing. Everything else is really damn good. But it's not top 5. Well, top 6 because nobody can agree. So top 6, my bad. basically lots of these cars are so close. There's an argument for why each car is better than the other, except for one. I think everyone knows what that one is. So let's go and start with the DEUS Vayanne. DEUS kind of flew under the radar. This car was so hyped. And then it came in. It like took French Guiana reverse. It took maybe San Diego Harbor. And then it just kind of disappeared. Like, I'm not seeing people talk about the DEUS anymore. Like, they talked about it when it came out. Now it's not being talked about as much. Like, it's got the best recovery in the game. Like, its recovery is so good. This car has a 6.5 wall time. Or 6.4. Low 6.4. No, it's not low 6.4. It's like mid 6.4. It's the closest thing to the 300 plus. Actually, no, not really. It's like, it's equal to a lot of gas-powered cars, but it's electric. Electric cars are not known to have good acceleration. So that's a first for electric vehicles. But it has terrible, and I mean terrible, handling in drifting. It's basically the electric Vel. Obviously, it doesn't have the raw speed, but it has that broken recovery. And that recovery will basically mean it just takes a track for free. But again, this car is really hard to handle, so it could go higher as time goes on. But right now, I just think its handling is not good enough to justify it being, higher than this. And I'm moving on. We have the Naran Supersport 300 Plus. Look, I'm sorry. I get why this car should be higher. Here's my argument. The 300 Plus was dominant because it accelerated faster than anything else. So, like, even though the Bolide, the Esco Attack handled better, this car still ruled in Pamea Showdown because it just accelerated faster. It was not easier to drive, but it was definitely faster. This car's acceleration is the best in the entire game. Like, this is something everyone's known for ages, and people think that this car is, like, necessary for Gauntlet. You know what? It kind of is. This car invalidates, like, so many in Gauntlet. It's ridiculous. It's so unfortunate, right? But it's okay. Like, this car, it's not that, like, undefeatable. If you couldn't tell, I'm struggling to find the acceleration sheet. Oh, okay, I found it. Hold on. Now that I found my acceleration sheet, let's continue talking about this car. Yeah, it accelerates really fast, but that does not invalidate it, because it cannot turn very well. And the thing is, when Absolute came, this car suffered the most out of the three ultimates. The other two, like, you would still see Bolide on 300 plus leaderboards. Like, in Pamea, you'd see, like, Bolide, the occasional Bolide. It'd be 300 plus, 300 plus, 300 plus, 300 plus, Bolide, 300 plus, 300 plus, 300 plus, yes, go attack, yes, go attack, yes, go attack. But if it was like Venice reverse, you'd only see Bolides and yes, go attacks, and Faradays. You would never see on 300 plus on Venice reverse, because the 300 plus cannot compete on handling tracks. So while it's contested on straight tracks by the Bolide and Yesco Attack and Faraday even, it cannot compete with them on the other tracks. And that's why I put it below. Because even though it has that sweet, spicy, low 6.4, 6.43, that is the best in the game. That's a low 6.4, it's almost 6.3. So even though it has that low 6.4 acceleration, its struggle to turn and drift is why I put it lower. Because it's a specialist, but it's not that much of a specialist. If it had a 6.38 acceleration, I think this car would still be top tier. But it just does not have that acceleration. Well, it does. It has the acceleration, but it just does not have the handling and drifting or the powerful acceleration to compensate for its bad handling. It still compensates, but it's just not enough to make it better. If the Absolute was not in the game, this would be probably the top car, because it would still have all its world records. But it doesn't, because now the Absolute's in the game, and this car has lost a lot of its records. The DEUS will even take some of its records, probably. So there you go, 300 plus. 5th best car in my opinion. Moving on to 4th, Koenigsegg Jesko Attack. Picture everything I said about the 300 plus, but swap it to some extent. Like, instead of acceleration being the strong stat, make that the weak stat, and make handling and drifting the strong stat. There you go, Jesko Attack. So that's the Jesko Attack. This car is so good in sprints, because it's really fast. It's not the fastest in the game, but it's really fast because of its raw speed. Like, one of the highest raw speeds in the game. And good drifting, high raw speed, of course, good BTN. Obviously, this nitro duration is not the strongest, it's average, but here's the thing. Actually, it's above average, but here's the thing. Doesn't matter with these high-end ultimate cars because they can just blue nitro to save their nitro. It's really not that big of a deal. So nitro doesn't matter, but I put the Esco attack with the 300 plus because again, the Esco attack is more versatile. Like you'd still see the Esco attack on the occasionally on like 300 plus dominated tracks. Like you would never see a 300 plus on like Asteroid Chase, but you would see Escos, but you would not see 300 plus at all. So yeah, that's why the Esco attack is here. Then next up is the Bolide. Bolide is really versatile. Like it's got 6.5 acceleration, which is pretty nice. It's got really nice handling, especially with the blue nitro. This car handles really well. From the time I remember driving it. It has raw speed, obviously, because it's ultimate. The only bad stats on this car are nitro duration, which is not the greatest. It's 6.75, 11.75, 15 average. But again, ultimate car does not matter. It does not need to worry about the nitro half as much as the Vulcan, half as much as the Agera RS, half as much as literally any other car. But this car is third because it's just outclassed. The Absolute is a direct replacement for the Bolide, and it's really sad. If the Absolute was not in the game, I know I said the 300 plus was going to be the best car in the game. No, I'm wrong. Bolide would have been the best car in the game if the Esco Absolute was not in the game. But the Absolute's in the game, and the Bolide is dead. But even when it's dead, it's still third. Busted car. Busted car. And moving on to another busted car. I hate to put this one here. I mean, everyone knows the Absolute's first, so yeah. Faraday Future, second best car in the game. Best drifting in the game. Third highest top speed in the game. Second best speed recovery in the game. And you might say the nitro duration's bad. Yeah. 15.75 is not great. Perfect nitro is average though, so perfect nitro, it'll be fine. Yeah, you might lose speed, that's fine, but like, yeah, that's not fine, but like, this car doesn't care because it drifts so well. Like this car, its combination is so good. It kills the MP431. I already said this about the MP431 earlier. This car drifts so well, it recovers so well, it makes almost every other recovery car obsolete. Except for the DEUS and except for the Batista. You can use this car first in Sector 8. You can use this car second in Sector 8. You can use this car third in Sector 8. It probably won't work third in Sector 8 because you'll end up drift punching too hard, crashing into the wall, losing. But this car, so versatile. So versatile. Even though it's not an ultimate, it's basically a free-to-play ultimate. I don't care what people say. No, this thing is almost an ultimate. It just doesn't have the raw speed. It has everything else though. Broken car. Broken car. It doesn't care if it's not ultimate. It competes with the ultimates. You see this car on sprints. You see this car on basically every single track in the leaderboard. But even then, Absolute's 1864 for a reason. Second best acceleration in the game. The probably best nitro duration in the bracket. It's actually worse than the Vel. Like the Vel has a better combination of nitro duration. Absolute is slightly worse, but Absolute also handles way better. Again, because of high raw speed, you can blue nitrous. You can even orange nitrous in this car. It'll do fine. I mean, you can orange nitrous in any of them, but Absolute is probably the best one to do it in. It'll do fine. It only has bad recovery and kind of bad drifting, but that's it. That's it. Recovery doesn't even matter that much. What does recovery matter on? It matters on the Tenerife tracks, and that's it. It might matter on Sector 8, but if it really mattered that much, then the Esco attack wouldn't have had the world record for quite a while. And it did. The Esco attack had the world record, so speed recovery only matters really on 4 tracks. It's really the meta-defining trait on 4 tracks. Aside from those 4 tracks, Absolute is a contender on every other track in the game. Does not matter. It will fight for the top position on any track. Faraday, you won't see it on Monaco for the top positions because it just does not have the nitro duration or tops. It doesn't have the nitro duration. Like, it won't do well in Tokyo, it won't do well in Monaco. Absolute does well on Monaco, does well on Tokyo. But you know what? It also does well on Dubai. You know, where the 300 Plus does well. But you know what doesn't do well? The DEUS. DEUS probably doesn't do well on Dubai because it can't turn. But DEUS does well on a straight track. Absolute does well on a straight track. Well, Bolide does good on a twisty track. Well, Absolute does good on a twisty track. It is literally the perfect counterfeit car to any other car in the game. And that is why the Absolute is the undisputed best car in the game. And with that, this is the tier list. The 1860 tier list. I'd like to thank the people that are on screen right now for helping me make the tier list. And as time goes on, there's going to be more cars coming. So I'll probably have a comment pinned that adds updates to the list. And when the time comes, I'll make the tier list again with obviously the new cars, explain how they are, tell you where they go, and if I have any new opinions on older cars, I'll tell you them and move the cars accordingly. So with that, thank you for watching. The tier list will actually be in the description if you want to make your own. So yeah, comment below. Tell me what you think of the tier list. Tell me what you would place at the best. And maybe even make your tier list and tweet it at me. I'm only saying tweet it at me because my Twitter is down here. But yeah, that is it. Have fun with the tier list, and I hope this helps you figure out what car to buy. At the end of the day, though, almost all of these cars are really close to each other, with the exception of the Torino. The difference in time between these cars are probably like maybe half a second or so when they're all driven at their fullest potential, which is obviously a lot in terms of competitive terms, but from a casual perspective, that's not that much. So there you go. Almost every car is pretty solid, but obviously the best cars are the ones that are in higher tiers, and if you want a car recommended to you, I'd start from the Vulcan onwards. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in a more conventional video next time. Goodbye.